everything from the local wildlife to the water that's been watching him. It's really bizarre.
I'm sure there's a lot more we don't know what happened, but the main thing was to create these sleeper agents, I guess, or rewire people's brain.
But the piece of evidence that we found most interesting was a picture of D Platoon, and in a caption next to it, we can see that Gerard has written, quote, "Part of the cycle, all pawns. Judge, find him." How's it going, everybody? I'm Isaac, and I'm here with Shane.
Hello.
And welcome back to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole, the show where we go level by level in Ready or Not, breaking down the narratives, the subtle details, and subplots that are really easy to miss in this game.
Yeah, because it's just a little hard to notice these things when everyone's trying to kill you. But Isaac and I have spent far too much time at this point investigating Ready or Not's levels and analyzing those tiny details so we can guide you through the stuff other people don't seem to notice.
Exactly. And in this episode, we're going to be exploring Lethal Obsession, which is going to be just an insane episode. So by all means, prepare yourself and let's get into it.
Hell yeah.
So our initial briefing here tells us that a man has recently ambushed the East McCade police station. Now, this perpetrator lit a vehicle on fire in front of the police station, and then when officers came out to investigate it, the man shot several of them before fleeing the scene in an RV. Now, after doing a little bit of digging, the LSPD has now found out that the perpetrator in question is believed to be Gerard Scott, a former analyst with the USIA.
So the USIA, or the United States Intelligence Agency, is analogous for the real-world CIA. I believe we mentioned it very briefly a few episodes back, but they are sort of like the big boogeyman haunting Ready or Not. They are the thread that connects to everything, and this is the first mission that we finally get to see what those threads entail.
Now, we're told in our briefing that Gerard is a man who's said to have no known family, no known friends, and he was largely off our radar until this event. So as far as we know, he has no real motive for doing what he's done here. But with all of that being said, let's go ahead and make our arrival.
So arriving on site, we see this is a very rough looking cabin. It's flanked by a flaming RV. There are several chain-linked fences, and strangely enough, there are a bunch of weird looking plants potted outside. We can see graffiti on the sides of the building that says, "Always watching, always listening," as well as the Illuminati eye, which, for those of you who don't know about the Illuminati, boy howdy, you're in for a rude awakening, because we're gonna talk about that. There is a lot of conspiracy stuff here. So we're going to start this investigation by starting upstairs and moving down. So upon making entry, you are likely to explode from one of Gerard's various booby traps placed all over this house. And I'm sure anyone who's played this map can relate to this, this phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the console release coming out in the past week, the amount of memes that I've seen on Instagram of people like, you know, so ready to play Ready or Not, this game looks sweet. And then they go to Gerard's house and just get eviscerated on the first door that they open.
Exactly.
It's been a really fun thing to watch. I think if the game only had one sort of moment that everybody experienced, I guess it would be the booby traps there, because I think that's the first level where you really experience them in the game.
Oh yeah. I remember the first time I played it, because this is still pretty, if you're playing the game in like the campaign mode, it's still pretty early on. And in fact, this is the traps notwithstanding, it's one of the easier missions in the game, but goddamn, those traps, they just sneak up on you. they just, you don't expect them, again, especially the first time you played, and just get your shit rocked real quick. And I remember when I first played this map, I just wanted to see how many doors they put these traps on. And back in the early version of this map, there was an outhouse with a door that could open. And I was like, there's no way they would put one in the outhouse. Sure enough, there is. But thankfully, it's not there anymore. Now you can just step into the outhouse without a fear of getting blown up. But
it's the main place you got to keep safe, man. I can understand why. Personally, I've got my bathroom tripwired as well. So
right.
But anyway. Anyways, though, Shane said, we're going to be starting upstairs in this episode. And starting upstairs, you'll quickly notice a cabin in complete disarray. There are papers scattered across the floor. The windows are covered and boarded up with all sorts of debris. And there's various graffiti indicating that Gerard isn't that sound of mind here. And in some of this graffiti, we'll even find reference to that organization, the USIA, which we'll see a lot more of in this mission. Making your way downstairs, you'll sort of find more of the same here. You'll see a bunch of sticky notes on the wall, and on a lot of these, you see staring eyes. It's sort of obvious at this point that Gerard feels like he's being watched. He's incredibly paranoid. And this imagery is repeated a lot downstairs too. And here we'll find a diagram titled Constant Surveillance, where Gerard hypothesizes that everything from the local wildlife to the water has been watching him. It's really bizarre.
Moving on to the living room, we can actually find a projector showing a slideshow of various people with their eyes crossed out, as well as an eerie take on the USIA logo. And in the neighboring kitchen, we can also find tons of stolen government documents and papers scattered about, some of which appear like they might have been stolen from the LSPD. Even Gerard's fridge is covered in conspiracy graffiti with mixes of mathematical equations and real and fake Latin. And I know when I first covered this map, I was stuck on this fridge for so long trying to translate that stuff. I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's a good mix of real Latin and fake Latin with like a good mix of Spanish thrown in just cuz. So it's like, when I was first looking at this, I was really trying to like break it down, but no, it's mostly gibberish, I think.
And I think it sort of makes sense here because Gerard is pictured as this USIA analyst, the equivalent of a CIA analyst. So you would think that he has some sort of experience in code breaking or maybe making his own codes. Mm-hmm. And when I was making my video on it, the first thing that I did was I plugged the text into Google and I was like, what is this guy trying to say? And Google was like, hey, Isaac, are you schizophrenic? We don't know what the hell you're talking about here. Because there's like you said, there's a lot of real and then there is a lot of gibberish there too. So it makes you wonder if he's almost writing his own sort of code here or something. I don't know. That's my conspiracy theory.
Dude, when I first covered this map, I'm pretty sure after researching half the stuff talked about this, I'm on some watch list now. Like it's the
You're on a watch list.
Yeah. It's like he's looking up Latin and weird plants and like, what is this about the government? And it's like, okay, yep, I'm on a list now.
But anyway, most notably downstairs is Gerard's bedroom, which is filled to the brim with all of this conspiracy stuff. That we're going to be stuck on this bedroom for a minute, so you better just get comfortable. And here we'll see conspiracy doodles on the walls and more of these ramblings, and we'll even find reference to the veterans of the Left Behind and their tension with Senator Fremont. Now, it's important to mention here that this mission occurs prior to the assassination attempt on the senator. So maybe seeing this here, Gerard might have had something to do with it.
And if you guys recall from the Left Behind missions, there is evidence to suggest that the Left Behind had someone on the inside. They knew routes Fremont was going to take. They knew a lot of stuff about where Fremont would be, what he would do, and where to take the best shot. And it's worth noting that that piece of evidence that suggests that they might have some deeper connection also has a picture of a bunch of men standing in front of a USIA building. So just the conspiracy theory, the tendrils run deep. It's getting crazy already.
The dots start to connect. Eventually, we promise they do.
Yeah. And also on these bulletin boards, we can find references to some of the horrible things going on in Los Sueños in general, things like we've discussed before. And Gerard believes that all of the city's issues are due to the USIA.
The further that we look down this bulletin board, though, the more that we'll become aware of some of the USIA's shady practices, which includes an MK Ultra-esque LSD experiment, which had the intention of, quote, reforming deviant minds, as they liked to put it. However, the more that we begin to look into this experiment, the more that we'll find out that they didn't really have the best of intentions here. A different article on the board talks about how a former USIA lab assistant spoke out against the program and stated that the participants here were being dosed with the drug without their knowledge. They also said that instead of reforming deviant minds, the agency was actually using this program as a way to create incorruptible law enforcement agents, which is just crazy, right?
And before we move on, if you don't know what MKUltra is, it is a real-world experiment run by the CIA in the 1950s to the 1970s that was basically all about brainwashing. The government was trying to use LSD and other psychedelics to influence and control human behavior through chemical, biological, psychological, or electronic means. And this was a crazy experiment, to say the least. Again, this actually happened.
Right, yeah.
And if I remember correctly, what they ended up doing, or a good chunk of this experiment was using prostitutes to lure men back to motels where they would drug them with these psychedelics, and then the CIA guys would watch them from an observing room, adjacent to it or something like that, and just seeing what it would do. And I'm sure there's a lot more we don't know what happened, but the main thing was to create these sleeper agents, I guess, or rewire people's brain. Manchurian Candidate comes to mind if you guys know that movie, or Winter Soldier. There you go. There's a more modern reference.
Right. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
So naturally, you guys can probably understand why Gerard was so taken aback by this experiment. If it's MKUltra-esque, if they're using the LSD to drug these people without their knowledge, the USIA doesn't really seem like your typical friendly government organization anymore, right? This starts to paint a much darker picture of them. And it gets worse. It gets substantially worse, right? And moving on to another sort of document, we find the phrase MLO methods scribbled at the bottom. And if we move on to another board, we'll find more reference to this MLO with a clipping that reads, quote, "Partial list of MLO experiment subjects leaked. Most of them are in positions of power today. Law enforcement, politics, and national intelligence." So it seems that this LSD drug experiment, whatever you want to call it, is the MLO experiment. I mean, that's the way my brain sort of ties it together. So from here on out, when we talk about the MLO or the MLO experiment, we're talking about the USIA's drug experiment on these unknowing people.
And to dive even further into this MLO thing, there is a radio inside this room that talks about all this conspiracy stuff. Gerard was apparently listening to a podcast called Truth LS, and they talk about AI technology that the government uses that's better than the public. There's mentions of butterflies and other weird conspiratorial ramblings about the city's state and everything falling apart being a big government conspiracy. But the biggest piece of MLO lore we get is that in this podcast, the host mentions specifically that the MLO are the child of the USIA and that they love LSD experimentation and Los Sueños is their favorite playground.
So yeah, not very ideal, right, Shane?
No.
I mean, this whole thing, it's getting pretty out of hand pretty quickly here. But we can also find a board inside that mentions how there are all these mysterious deaths and murders occurring around Los Sueños. And these are deaths and murders that Gerard Scott blames on the USIA. And interestingly, we can actually see some of the members of that MLO experiment list are some of the same people that are going missing. According to Gerard, it would seem that the USIA is trying to tie up any loose ends related to this project. And on the final board, we find out what Gerard plans to do about it. He's seeking retribution for all of this madness that the USIA has been up to. And what he's doing here is that he plans to make ricin.
And not just standard ricin, which, in case you don't know, is a very dangerous poison that can enter the bloodstream and affect you days later and you wouldn't even know until you're dead. if that, I mean, I guess every poison works like that, but it's a scarier poison.
Right, yeah.
Basically, he's trying to make aerosolized ricin, and that is very, very difficult because based on my research into ricin, because I had to do that.
Here comes that watch list, man.
Exactly. This is why I'm on the watch list. So in order to make ricin, it needs to be a very fine powder, but aerosolized ricin is very hard because if it gets clumpy or something like that, it can't enter the lungs and affect the intended target very well. But somehow Gerard has developed a way to get past that issue, and he made ricin bombs based off of those plants we saw growing out in the field out front. Those were castor beans, which he used to grind down to make ricin. And that is the whole plan of getting back at these USIA guys. He wants to send out these packages containing ricin.
And in this ricin production basement, we can also find various different dead animals which Gerard has tested this poison out on. If I'm not mistaken, you see this sort of, checklist with the amount of days the ricin took to kill, the different animals. So at the bottom of that, you see it says Fed or police officer, one or the other. And that's how we know that we're the next intended target. Gerard intends to use this ricin on police officers before using it on the USIA. But with that, after we bring order to this chaos, we've just about covered everything in this mission. So for now, we're going to head back to the station for debrief and start to take a look at some of our evidence. So the two pieces of evidence that we'll find in this room are a USIA challenge coin and a ricin spray bottle that Gerard planned to mail to unsuspecting victims. Now, what I imagine he meant to do here was, you'd open the box a la, the Unabomber or somebody like that, and then that spray bottle would spray the unsuspecting victims. But the piece of evidence that we found most interesting was a picture of D Platoon. And in a caption next to it, we can see that Gerard has written, quote, "Part of the cycle, all pawns, Judge, find him."
So we are D Platoon. Our player character is part of D Platoon, and we are specifically named Judge. We are David Judge Beaumont. That is the main character of Ready or Not, the element leader of D Platoon. So Gerard knows us, and I believe this is the first instance of referring to the main character of the game out of any of the missions. I think this is the very first time.
I think you're right.
But it goes even deeper than that. We didn't mention it before, but there are various recordings around this map, and some of these recordings discuss Judge by name.
So in this recording that Gerard mentions us, he says that he's seen our training, that he knows what kind of man we are, and he goes on to suggest that we're a puppet, just like him. Now this could mean that Gerard knows us, the player character, personally, but as we can tell in the story so far, that isn't really the case. It's clear that he has a fixation on Judge and that he wants to make him see the truth about something, but what that truth is hasn't really been revealed to us yet. Gerard goes on to talk about some kind of cycle and says that he needs to be the one to break it. And it seems like this is the motivation for his entire plan here. Whatever he's referencing in this tape is the reason that he started making ricin. It's the same reason he went to the police station and shot all of the innocent officers. Gerard is very clearly onto something much larger than we can identify right now. But with that, we've covered just about all the details. So, Shane and I wanted to sit here and kind of break down all of this information because this was a lot. This is a lot for you guys to listen to. So we're going to kind of just go through the motions here and talk a bit about what we see in this mission, what we think it could mean, and what we can expect going forward.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right there with me, but when I first started dissecting this, I genuinely was overwhelmed with all the information at once. But I think the first thing that I want to talk about is the mind control and the sleeper agent thing going on in Los Sueños. I have my theories, but I want to hear yours first.
Okay.
What do you think is like their overarching goal? Like, what is MLO, USIA, whether they're one and the same at this point, it doesn't really matter, but what do you think is like their plan?
So as of right now, the way that I've been looking at it is that the USIA had this experiment. It's clear to us through the little bits of evidence that we've seen that they were trying to make incorruptible law enforcement agents. And their means of doing this was by, unknowingly drugging these people or drugging people that were unknowing. And that's very dubious. That's not, you know what I mean? That's a very bad means of doing something. So what they could be working for can't be good, right? In my mind, I kind of hypothesize that they're trying to, naturally assert more control over everybody, that they're trying to use these incorruptible law enforcement officers as, a means to capture more power for themselves. I really don't know what else it could be if you're willing to do something that evil. If it is a thing where they're just like, yeah, we're feeding these cops LSD to just make them better at their job.
Because it works like that.
Nothing deeper than that. Yeah. Don't worry about it, right? It's that's kind of, that doesn't really track with me. So naturally, I think that they've got some pretty bad intentions. But as of right now, I don't really know.
Yeah, I always was under the assumption that it's like a orchestrated chaos. So they do an orchestrated chaos, because we saw Gerard mentions things about like, oh, there's a rise in poverty, murders, crime, like everything's going through the roof all of a sudden, and somehow the USIA is tied into it. So a part of me wonders if they're trying to orchestrate more chaos to allow for more government control. And therefore more government control, you would have even stronger government control if you had these police officers or just agents in general who literally could not say no to you. You have these brainwashed agents who are just robots, basically. It's like, okay, we're going to go do some shady shit. Now you're going to protect us or do some, unsavory things, and they can't say no. And if you're a shady organization, that would be perfect for you. That's exactly what they want. They want to have these programmable, I guess, for lack of a better term, like Manchurian candidates. They're winter soldiers.
Right.
They want all these, like an army of just empty-headed, skilled soldiers. And the references to Judge and all this stuff about Judge makes me wonder if Judge is one of these sleeper agents, if he has some kind of connection to the MLO or the USIA, because again, Gerard mentioned Judge by name. He says he has seen his training. He knows what kind of man he is. He's part of this cycle, and what that cycle is, we don't know. Is it a cycle of being stuck with this like mind control shit until you eventually break it and you break your programming? Is that the cycle? But if that is the cycle, does that mean Gerard was potentially brainwashed at some point? Is that why he went crazy? Because he broke his programming and broke the cycle?
It very well could be.
There's just a lot of things. Yeah, there's so much in this.
I really do like that theory, though, of Judge potentially being part of this, because looking through some of our missions and seeing some of the stuff that we go through, it seems almost like it might be a little above his pay grade at times, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And if he is getting sent in for every single one of these events, it might lead you to believe that it is just training. And maybe the USIA isn't necessarily setting these events up, that they're not, going in and manufacturing all this horrible chaos. But maybe they have intel on it and they're just turning a blind eye, and they're letting these, domestic terrorist groups and these other unsavory people operate in Los Sueños so they can use them as Judge's sort of training partners here.
And to go even deeper into the conspiratorial rabbit hole, there you go, tie it back into the name. Hell yeah, down the rabbit hole. We can talk about Senator Fremont, because I think he's involved in this somehow. Allow me to explain. We know that somebody gave the Left Behind information on Fremont's positions, where he's going, yada, yada. we know Fremont he's trying to push the anti-vet funding cut thing. He wants to cut funding from the vets and all that stuff. These vets have likely been up in arms against this for a long time, yet something finally pushed them into action, resulting in them trying to kill Fremont. And we know, again, they received intel, and a bit of that intel involves the USIA. So what if Fremont is one of these sleeper agents? Because we know the MLO list mentioned specifically politicians. So they don't have to be these super cops like
high-ranking people.
They don't have to be super cops like judge or in military positions or anything like that. Maybe they're just in political positions. Now imagine if there was a politician who you could just literally program to say whatever you want. Like that could be horrendous.
You hear of politicians being bought by lobbies and stuff, but here you're talking about a guy that's literally programmed potentially by one of the, by a government organization. So what better way to assert your control and do whatever you want to do than having a politician that's literally mind controlled by you?
Mm-hmm. And that also explains why they were so overzealous about killing him. Because not only did they have a plan to kill him when he was giving a speech, but they had a fail-safe to go get him back at the hotel. I don't know much about political assassinations, but I'd assume that if the first attempt doesn't work, you don't, try again within 5 hours. The fact that they tried again within the same day, or at least that night, tells me that they're like, we need to get rid of this guy for a very good reason, because if he's in position, then the USIA literally has a puppet. Ties back into what Gerard was talking about with D platoons. They're just puppets. They're all puppets. Oh God, we're spiraling.
It's getting off the rails. Man, I knew when we first started recording this would sound like a podcast my crazy uncle listens to. Right? It was gonna get crazy. But yeah, I mean, the more that you look at this evidence and you tie it together with the other missions and the storyline, crazy's kind of the only way to see it, right? Gerard might be a wild, zany, conspiracy-driven person, but, a crazy conspiracy theorist is right twice a day. So, I mean, you've got to understand that even if he seems like this just wild man, he worked with the USIA. And for undisclosed reasons, he left that group. He must have seen something there that he didn't agree with, something that he thought was wrong, to drive him to do all of this just crazy shit, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the way my brain kind of operates anyway.
Oh, yeah. And I believe there's when I first covered this, I think one of my initial theories was after Gerard discovered probably all these sleeper agents or something like that, instead of killing him, they subjected him to more LSD experimentation, yet less focused, more so with the goal to fry his brain. So after discovering all this information, the USIA fried his brain and then forced him to retire. And all that was left was this crazy guy who would take him to their word. They're crazy. Literally, he's running around rocking a ghillie suit in his underwear. He lives out in the woods. He's insane. Why would you take him seriously?
I hate to interrupt. That is a really interesting kind of dynamic that you see in this mission, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's got all of this, the further that you look, he's talking about the water's watching him, and the deer and the wildlife is like spying on him, and all this just crazy shit. But as we'll come to find out later in the story, some of what he's saying actually has merit. And that's kind of horrifying given the context of some of the stuff he talks about here.
Mm-hmm. So maybe at the end of the day, maybe Gerard is telling us more truths than lies. But then, it begs the question. It's like, okay, so if this is all true, how the hell do you stop it? And if Judge is really part of this cycle, if he is one of these, sleeper agents, holy shit, that's one man versus an entire government body.
Exactly.
If not one man versus an entire government body and a splinter faction of even worse people.
But if you think he's crazy, if you think everything that we've been talking about here is just nonsense today, as we'll come to find out in our next episode, Gerard wasn't the only USIA agent that we'll come across in Los Sueños, and it's definitely not the end of the MLO. But with that being said, I think we've just about covered everything today here, Shane. What do you think? I mean, we've got over a lot. So if any of you guys are interested in checking us out on the other platforms, you can find me on YouTube under Isaac Morgan, or you can follow me on Instagram at the Isaac Morgan.
And if you want to follow me, you can find me here on YouTube at Shane No One Cares and Shane Please Shut Up, or on Instagram at Shane the Doyle.
But as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in for today's episode of Down the Rabbit Hole.
And remember, whenever you look up government conspiracy theories, use a VPN, or else you'll end up like me on a list, which, yeah.
All right, we're going to cut Shane off before he keeps on acting sketchy. But as always, we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, bye. Yeah, bye.